Welcome to the Andrew D'Angelo podcast.
Constant Constance. Each week, Andrew, renowned jazz saxophonist and brain cancer survivor, invites us to look at the many worlds of his guests, with conversations that cover all the arts, human resilience, a little bit of politics, and a lot of humour.
You can't fail to have a fantastic time.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today we have somebody I've known for many years. I wouldn't say we've been that close, at least, I don't know, not recently. Aries Dela Cruz, who is the press secretary to the Manhattan Borough President. Aries, I apologize again for being late. I was tardy today, and thank you so much for being here. It's wonderful to have you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's very, very kind of you. Very kind of you to say.
And what's neat about it, we just found out that Mayor Pete became transportation secretary, right?
Yeah, it's definitely very historic. He's broken a lot of barriers, and I can't wait to see what he does. We need a lot of help here in New York State, specifically.
Help in what way? What do you mean?
We need the feds to approve congestion pricing. We need the portal bridge that connects New Jersey to the rest of to New York City repaired. And yeah, there's just a lot of infrastructure and transportation stuff that he needs to help us out with, and the MTA as well, which is facing.
Don't get started on the MTA, man.
Yeah.
And it's coming from an openly gay man. And I mean, I would assume, since you're a press secretary, that you're part of your gig is that you need to sort of read social media and just see how people are talking about things. Is that fair? Or
yeah, I consume a lot of social media. I consume a lot of news, a lot of print, TV, everything.
One of the things that I'm fascinated by, Aries, and I wanted to ask you is, so Mayor Pete gets appointed as a transportation secretary, and then there's actually people writing really mean comments about the fact that he is gay. And I mean, I'm sure you know what I'm talking. I'm like, what? Like this is a historic, beautiful moment. Or when Jen Psaki, the press secretary to the White House, is doing her. Do you ever read the super chats?
I don't, but I know what people say about her, and
I'm like, that's a hard gig. I mean, she's up there fielding these insane questions that are national security questions, and people are like, she needs to stop saying the so much, or whatever.
Or she needs to stop saying circle back. That's like their big
right
thing.
I said I have done those live interviews, and I'm not even talking about Russia or whatever.
Right.
So long question, but has that been your experience? Or do you do these press conferences? I assume you do.
It's very rare for press secretaries, I would say, at the local level to actually get in front of reporters and answer questions from them.
Okay.
For the most part, we allow our principals, the people we work for, to be the ones answering the questions. So those are for like live things. So when I set up a press conference, I'm rarely the one in front of the podium. It's usually my boss. But on the phone, sometimes, and on email, I am the one answering the questions to the press. A lot of it is background information. They want to know, what's the law behind this, or I'm just double checking this fact. So I'm helping them do a lot of fact checking. I'm helping them just gain some background, some history. A lot of reporters are new to the city, or they've just been assigned a new beat that they don't know a whole lot about. Like that, sometimes they're from, they normally cover food, but now they're covering land use, or they're normally covering transportation, and now they're covering City Hall and things like that. So I'm usually the one with the institutional memory that can point them to the right direction or give them some clues.
Right.
A lot of that isn't spoken and isn't mentioned in the story.
I think a lot of people over the last 4 years, especially during this election, the election with Biden, we're understanding how much we really don't fucking know about government, right? People were like, wait, something happens on January 6th? We thought we just voted, they counted them, the electors,
Right.
did their thing and it's over, right? And we're like, oh, something else happens? And then, the insurrection. Yeah. But it's fascinating to me how unknowledgeable people are admitting they are about the political process in our own country, and me included, which is why I wanted to ask you to come on. I know your time is limited, which is classic for you politicians, man. I got 5 minutes for you. And then technical difficulties aside, but that all of this being said, we have a general understanding of your job description and some other things. What has it been like to be in politics as a politician during COVID? I mean, and I'm assuming that you have some kind of contact with Governor Cuomo on some level, maybe not like, in the same room, I don't know. But what has it been like? I mean, we've all heard all the other stories about policy and this COVID relief bill. But for you, politician in politics, COVID, this transition of power thing, what's it? I don't know.
Yeah, it's probably one of the most unique and most complicated years in government that we as a country, as a nation, as a people have ever experienced. Being in government right as the pandemic hit has been it's been bonkers. The first few weeks, it was really hard to figure out, what to do, what was going on. Particularly, there was very little guidance from the federal government. But thankfully, I think in those early days, the state really did and the city really did its best to step up with the limited amount of information that we had. And we knew that people were dying, people were getting sick. We were getting conflicting messages from the Trump administration. And so things like, were we going to close the schools? Or were we going to close businesses? A lot of those things that were really hard to think about at that time are now seen as wisdom. Ordering people to wear masks. For the first few weeks of the pandemic, people really weren't doing that. I was doing that. And I was taking public transportation to go to work. But I would be the only one in the subway, wearing a mask, and people would look at me, strangely, or they were afraid of me. But now that's something that's seen as normal behavior. And the CDC, eventually issued guidance to start wearing masks. And so a lot of that, we were building the airplane as we were flying it. And we really had to. There's no playbook for this. There are pandemic, plans and playbooks, but the minute that it's actually happening, with the various conditions on the ground, a lot of it is really due to the ingenuity and the energy and passion that a lot of people behind the scenes, people like me, but also the people that you see on TV, are really involved in. There are a lot smarter than you may think they are. The folks, the politicians that you see on TV, as well as the people who work for them. And I think ultimately, regardless of the differences that we have when it comes to policy, like who's going to be eligible, who's not going to be eligible, how many sites are we opening, what's happening with testing, all those things. There's a lot of policy differences, but I really think ultimately, everyone who works in government, we all have family members, we all have people we care about. We want to make sure that they're protected. Another thing that really complicated the pandemic response, of course, was the social unrest that happened in New York City, particularly in the summertime, in reaction to the George Floyd stuff. We had a lot of actions that some people felt unsafe, and there was issues happening downtown, and then a curfew had to be instituted, which my boss disagreed with because we felt that it was disproportionately applied. But there was again all these complications that made it one of the most unusual years, I think, in American history. But I think there's a new dawn on the horizon. There we have a new president, we have a new administration. There's more vaccines. Just a few minutes ago, the governor announced that the Biden administration was giving us 20% more vaccines than normal. And so that is allowing us to expand vaccine eligibility. We've vaccinated a total of 2 million people so far in the state. I don't know the exact numbers for New York City, but I think that's pretty good. And we just need to, keep that energy up, keep that momentum going. And I'm hoping, I'm sure you're hoping, that we can start to eventually, by the summer, start to, be fully protected and start to see family members once again and start to go to a semblance of a normal life. Start to have theaters open, restaurants,
jazz clubs,
performing arts venues. They're really starting to look at rapid testing as a way to get businesses restarted again. It's not 100% perfect, but for people who want to take that risk, or for people who feel that they are, they've made that calculation, they can do that. And what's great about the pandemic, and it's really made people start to think about public health and what they feel that their risks are when it comes to engaging in certain kinds of behaviors. Gay men have had to navigate that kind of thinking for many years. You've had many experiences with that. Like, how comfortable am I engaging in this act versus this act? Or how am I putting the public at risk, my family members, people around me? What are those levels, and what are the steps that I'm going to take to protect myself? Am I going to wear one mask? Am I going to wear two masks? Am I going to social distance? Am I going to take the vaccine? Is it enough that I've taken one dose? Is it 2 doses? And now they're thinking about, Moderna, I think, is thinking about perhaps a third booster dose for the variants that are out there. So it's been very it's given me hope. And the fact that we're able to produce vaccines in such a short amount of time, these vaccines have been in development for a few years. They really are the reason why it's been so quick is because they really have been developing them from the first instance of SARS.
Okay. That's something, I'm getting this weird feedback loop. I don't know if you can just quickly mute yourself while I'm talking, but just so it's not on the, when people are watching it. But I've heard that before. Thank you. That, these have been in development for several years. I'm like, wait, what? Because we only discovered it in March, apparently, or February of 2020. So please do fill us in.
Sure. So as you know, coronavirus is called SARS coronavirus 2. And that is because there was originally a SARS coronavirus 1. And that was during the SARS epidemic many years ago. I don't know the exact number of years. But ever since then, scientists have been working on counteracting that, or inoculating against that. And so with the development of this new one, they really just had to make a few changes to the original SARS vaccine to be able to handle SARS-2, which is basically what we have now. And so when people are saying, oh, this is untested, actually it's been tested for quite a while. And we now have the technology to, and I'm not a scientific expert, we now have the technology to make RNA changes and really minor modifications to vaccines to be able to make it more effective against these new variants and these new strains.
One thing I've been asking people, Aries, I've had a lot of musicians on, obviously, and a chef. I had a Black Lives Matter activist on. And so I'm asking people their take. Your first generation immigrant, you told me, right? I knew that, but I'm pretending like you didn't tell me that. And you're a gay man and you're in politics. What's that been like? Have you experienced overt, homophobia or anything of the sort? Or even in your case, like with your mask on, are people like, he's probably a Japanese guy on the train, in the early days of the pandemic? Maybe. I don't know. You know how people are. I don't know.
Yeah. I would say not recently have I experienced any overt or explicit racism or homophobia in my line of work. Certainly there's implicit, institutional types that are sort of more insidious, that are kind of harder to describe. A lot of people sometimes when they see an email with my name, with my last name, or when they see my face, they may not give me the respect that I've earned or like the expertise that I know, they may not take it as seriously coming from someone who looks like me versus someone
who looks
might
like
have,
me,
right? Or who might have a similar education and political background and experience that I do. They may take them more seriously. Or I have to be very careful about critiquing someone or pushing back against something if someone is a white person, particularly if they're older, but that's not always the case, but generally if they're older. I've learned early on to be very calibrated in the way that I word things and be a little bit more delicate. I can recall one time when I was working for the governor, and there was an organization that really wanted the governor's help with pushing for funding for their industry. And then I showed up, and there were 2 sign-in sheets. And when I emailed to RSVP, like they were so happy, they were very excited. They're like, "Oh, no one from the governor's office has ever attended one of our legislative briefings before." So I was like, "Oh, great! I'm very excited." I feel like it's my job to meet with as many people as possible and really hear what they have to say. And so they have these things called legislative briefings, which are from the organizations or groups of organizations. They come to talk about what their priorities are, what their bills are, and what the kind of money that they need from the state to be able to continue their mission. And so I came, and there was a sign-in sheet for the members of the public, and there was a sign-in sheet for elected officials and people who represent and work for elected officials. And I was signing in. I took the clipboard, was signing in, and then this person grabs the clipboard from me and was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, I'm signing in." They're like, "That's not for you." And I said, "What do you mean?" They're like, "These are for people, people who work for elected officials." And I was like, "Well, I'm from the governor's office. You invited me." And she turned, beet red and was so embarrassed.
Right.
And I don't necessarily think she was explicitly being racist, but I think the implicit, the way she was brought up or her experiences might have led her to see that, to feel that someone who looks like me couldn't possibly work as a mid-level government official,
right,
who had the power, to recommend certain things, the things that they were pushing for. They had things that they had been pushing for years.
Right.
They've been trying to get someone from the governor's office to attend their event, and here I was, but because there just wasn't a match between her expectations of who I was and what I looked like, versus what was actually in front of her. And so part of it, as a person of color in government, I've learned that there's things I can't do. I can't just show up to a meeting and wear, jeans and sneakers. I have to dress a certain way in order to be taken seriously. I have to talk a certain way. And so that a lot of that, I have to try just a little bit harder than a lot of my peers who are white, who are straight. It's something I face.
It's one of those things where, growing up as a white male, I don't think I ever was looked at in a derogatory or negative way just on appearance, right? Maybe if I did something, I was kissing my ex-boyfriend Carlo, somebody might say something, right? But without any of that, but then you and the Black Lives Matter activists I had on and some other people who don't look like everybody else. I don't know how else to say it.
Right.
The stories I'm hearing, even you have worked your way up to, you're throwing, when I was working with the governor, you're just tossing that around. You shouldn't have to prove yourself any further.
Right.
You're referring to the governor. And I could say, well, which one are you talking about? Right. And so when you go to the legislative meeting and some woman or whoever it is contemplating, how could you be here?
Right.
That's not a struggle that I can relate to. I don't understand. I think there's a lot of people, as we have found out, that do not understand that struggle, and therefore maybe even try to use derogatory terms or, whatever.
Right. And there have just been, in the past where I've had, before the pandemic, face-to-face meetings where I've had interns or, people who work for me, people I supervise, accompany me, and, they'll know who I am. They'll know that it's my executive assistant or the intern with me. And they'll start talking to the intern or someone who
wow.
I have to like redirect them. Like, hi, I am, you can talk, they're part of the conversation too, but eventually you'll have to convince me. They're taking notes, and they're valuable and they're great. But, you should really be speaking to me.
Right.
It can be embarrassing.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like me, just musician guy. If you took me to one of these meetings, they'd probably start talking to me.
Yeah. Exactly.
And I don't know I mean, I know a little bit, but I don't know anything, but they're like, all right, white male, this got a little gray hair. All right. He's probably, and that's that boy over there is probably just his, tag along. And it's
the assumed expertise, and it's the assumed, I guess, competence in a particular subject that is, very sad and jarring. And it is a challenge I have to work through every day. So I feel like every day I have to prove myself. I have to work quite hard. And working for both male elected officials and women elected officials, that's something I witness as well, where a lot of the women elected officials have to prove themselves as well they have to show that they're working hard. They have to be very careful about not sounding too angry, because then they're seen as emotional. Whereas we see that as a positive trait in male officials. They have to know the details because they don't want to be caught off guard. And so a lot of times for meetings, they're over prepared. They prepare quite a lot for meetings because they don't want to be seen as making a mistake. They're afraid, they're often afraid to make missteps or to make detailed mistakes. Whereas as a male elected official, they may not care as much as if they get a number wrong or a figure wrong, or if they get an issue wrong. So there's also a gender issue when it comes to politics and what you see on TV every day. You'll often see that my boss has a busier public schedule than the mayor or the governor on weekends. She works very hard on the weekends, whereas a lot of them, they take weekends off. And it often goes unnoticed. But she does work quite hard.
Can I interject something here, Aries? One of the interesting things was, as I was discussing when I think we spoke maybe 3 weeks ago or something about having you on the show, I was telling some of my more politically active friends that I was having, and I was practicing saying the press secretary to the Manhattan Borough President, and nobody knew who the Manhattan Borough President was. Like they go, "Do you know who that is?" And I was like, "Actually, I don't. I only know Aries." So we're all Googling it. We're on the phone, but we're Googling it. Oh, Gale Brewer. But this is where we're at politically. No one has any trouble chomping away at Trump in whatever direction, our former president, or, Jen Psaki, because she's on TV every day. I love that people still say TV, even though there really is no more TV, but okay, TV. And I wondered if you had a perspective on, I don't know, political enlightenment. Is this seems like a good thing to me, that I can call my friends who are in my age group, 40s, 50s, whatever, and say, I'm having you on. And they're like, well, who is the Manhattan Borough President? Like, wait a minute. How do we not know that?
Right.
Anyway,
and that really is because our education system. I mean, when I was in school, there wasn't a whole lot about New York State history and New York State politics and how Albany worked and how the city worked and, city council, if we even heard about that in school, or even the borough president or the comptroller. We know a lot about, the president and the Supreme Court and Congress and that kind of stuff. But I think a lot of our civic education and awareness, even though the decisions that are made in Albany and the decisions that are made in City Hall really affect us more on a day-to-day basis. Consider the fact that they can, open and close the subways, and they can keep you at home. The fact that we pay quite a lot more attention to presidential elections than we do to state elections, gubernatorial elections, mayoral elections, borough president. The fact that we almost know very little about that speaks to both the lack of civic education. They really have quite a lot of power and a lot of control, and a lot of your state and city tax dollars go to them, and also the diminishing level of coverage of state politics and local politics, and the sort of increasing level of coverage of national politics. It almost kind of makes it seem like a game, in the sense that it's almost like football or baseball, where you have like a team, your political party's your team, and you want your political party to win. And it almost seems like the very specific policy details don't quite matter. And meanwhile, the subway station around the corner is crumbling. Meanwhile, the level of education at your kid's school is not doing so great. Those are the things I think are more important than what's happening at the federal level. All the federal government can really do, defend our country, mobilize these medical resources, but at a very basic level, the state government can outlaw guns and do things involving women's health, sexual education, all those things that really do affect you at that level. It's not quite seen as important or as sexy, even though that's what I think should be the priority.
Oh, did you just say that it's not as sexy? I love
it's not as sexy. State and local politics.
I love you, man. I love you.
The sexy subject.
Right. And I guess we've gotten to a place where politics has become sexy again in general. So there's a lot more people watching press briefings and, this January 6th banal thing that's just supposed to take forever because they read every blah, blah, blah. And normally, that's the thing they show at midnight till 6 a.m. that nobody watches, right? But we're all like, oh shit, wonder what's going to happen.
I think it's a double-edged sword. I think people have expectations that most of the government should be banal, and I think that's ultimately a positive thing. Like, we shouldn't be scared every time the government does anything. We shouldn't feel anxious. We should feel reassured that the government is working for us. That when you vote, that your representatives are working hard for you. You shouldn't have to get text messages every time, every few hours, that something in the government is happening. Yes, it's a good thing that people are more aware, but also it's also kind of sad that people have to feel like their rights are at risk every time the Supreme Court is in session. People feel like they're being attacked or targeted every time the president makes an announcement. That is actually very sad.
I have a response to that, and I realize that we only have a few minutes left. But I remember right after Donald Trump was elected, and who started tweeting really, big stuff about what's going on in the government, true or not. I'm like, I don't think this should be happening. I don't think my president should be sending messages directly to my phone,
right,
that may implicate, national security and shit. I mean,
scaring you every 30 seconds.
I had to unfollow that man very early because I was like, this doesn't feel right to me. Okay, maybe I'm like that old guy, hey, you kids, get off my lawn and keep it down, whatever, right? But this does not feel right. I don't know why, but it doesn't.
Right. Yeah, you shouldn't have to feel scared by your government. You shouldn't have to live in fear. No one deserves that. And the past 4 years have really been quite traumatic for everyone involved, for sure.
All right. On that note, thank you, Aries. And here's to a better future. And thank you for everything that you do for us. I guess you work for.
I work for you.
The American population, right? I just, it's nice to meet somebody who, like you said, you're mid-level, but you're a sweet guy, and you wanted to chat with an artist and have a little conversation, and we kept it in a zone that we didn't really get super political, and I appreciate that too, because sometimes it's just nice to know, hey, there are nice people out there, and I've heard Gale Brewer is very sweet, but I've never met her. And I don't know if you know, Marty Markowitz lives across the street from me. Right. So he was the Brooklyn Borough President, and everybody hated him. Right. But anyway, so that's what I learned about borough presidents was when Marty moved in. But so thank you, Aries. And if there's anything that you want to say before you have to go, feel free to just have at it.
Thank you for doing what you do. And thank you. I really appreciate your enthusiasm and this brand new project that you've taken on. I wish you the best of luck, and maybe in the future I can come back on.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Constant Constance. Tune in every week for new conversations. And if you want even more, check out Andrew's Patreon for more exclusive content and additional conversations. Hosted and produced by Andrew D'Angelo. Edited and mixed by Lucy Little. Original music by Andrew D'Angelo and Maximilian Moore D'Angelo. Intro is Henrietta Weeks. Thanks so much. See you next time.
You fucking rocked it. Like
she doesn't
know she says podcast, right? Like she doesn't even